Hello, BookTube, and we're back with another Castaway, and this is Jen from Remembered Reads, and she's got at least I think an interesting set of books. The first one is a revisit from a previous Desert Island books, but we'll get to that in a moment. Tell me something about yourself, Jen.
So I live in the Toronto area. I talk a lot on my channel about weird nonfiction, usually about genocide, but I'm not going to be talking much about genocide on this because I feel like if I was on a desert island, do I want to read about genocide or do I want to feel a little bit more uplifted? So
No, that's good. Okay, so do you want to just jump into them then, or
we might as well.
yeah?
I'm
Okay.
boring. You don't want to hear me talk about myself.
Okay, so yeah, well, the first book, I guess, and it better be the one I was talking about because otherwise everybody going, "What's going on?"
I will confuse everyone. Yes, the first book is Wilderness Survival for Dummies, which I saw some jokey conversation about this on one of the previous Desert Island videos. And I thought to myself, this is actually a decent series. People make fun of these, but I think they're great introductions. So I thought, I'm going to take this out of the library. And it is indeed pretty decent. Um, Unfortunately for deserts, maybe not quite so much. It seems to assume that you're lost somewhere in the woods in more of a temperate climate, but still in general, the basics of bushcraft, you can't go wrong with that. And basics of things like field dressing. Now, I saw that you told Mark from Book Time with Elvis that he could bring Elvis as a freebie. So I
Yeah.
feel like I could bring my tally dog as a freebie because she's quite a good hunter. So if I had her on the island, the field dressing bits would be very useful. Because we
Yeah,
could
and well,
barrel the small game.
it looks well. No, I thought for a minute it was like double thickness of most of them, but it's I guess about normal size.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it does it. I guess it talks about how to start fire and everything too with
Yeah.
everything or
Special considerations for forests and jungles. It has a bit, there is actually a part on crafting a raft and how to build that
okay.
if you have some scrap lumber, um, how to signal in emergencies. So the part where you get rescued, this is be
Well,
useful.
it's talking about jungle, so there could be
Yeah.
very well jungle on the island.
Well, but if it's a desert, maybe not. Well, or it could
Wow.
be one of those islands like in Polynesia where you have so many microclimate zones. So yeah, let's go
Yeah,
with
well,
that.
it's also I guess as you know it's a multi-dimensional island. There's only one island that everybody's on, uh, and as I say, you get and if people want to know how they get there. It's a 3 hour tour. Uh, you know,
Come on, you're not singing the song then?
oh God, no, I won't try that. I lose enough viewers with my own voice, let alone trying to sing. But I always say too, but you won't have the professor or Marianne with you though. That's the downside. You know.
Now, how fair is that? You need the
Well,
whole cast and crew.
that's kind of interesting. Yeah, that was on Regina St. Clair's one. So yeah, it's like because she hadn't seen it. I think she just, if I remember right, she just sort of saw it listed as
Yeah.
a how-to type thing.
Here's some, let me see if there's some fire building, for
Ah,
example.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it'll tell you how to carve up a deer as well. I guess if you could bring
Yeah.
down deer.
Yeah. And it has directions for the stars, both northern and southern hemisphere. So
Oh, okay. So it
depending on,
is. So it is more than just northern.
yeah. But the sections that aren't are pretty a smaller percentage of the whole. But
Okay.
um, yeah, like a lot of the bits about raft work and wilderness diet seems to assume that you're in a more northern climate zone, but
Hmm. And
there
then
are bits
like
and
that,
pieces about this.
does it tell you how to build a palatial house or just a lean-to or what's the
Sadly, it seems like the kind of shack that they teach kids to build in camp, where you put all the sticks together against something and hopefully you're out of the wind.
Okay. Well, that is kind of interesting because yeah, I knew because you had messaged me after. I think it was after that one that I asked you to do it, or maybe before, and you said you were waiting, and it took how long did it take to get that?
It took a couple of months. Like this is apparently really popular. I couldn't believe the holds because the library has 12 copies of this and it still took forever for me to get it. So
Well, everybody saw it on my channel and they wanted it.
that must be it.
Right.
Push the demand up.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll
Guys
move
can
on
get
to the
that
next one, and we'll leave the dummies behind.
one.
But
All
it
right.
doesn't sound like it's a very dummy book. It sounds like it's
Well,
you.
so I'm going to hold up a mock copy because this is not actually the book that I put it aside and then I couldn't find it. But it is a pocket encyclopedia, which sadly they don't put out anymore because obviously everybody's Googling everything. But one of the ones that came out in the 90s, maybe, and it's just an encyclopedia, a couple thousand pages, but in a mass market paperback size. And I think that's fantastic because you're wandering on the island, you're just thinking about things, and you wonder to yourself, what years were the Crimean War happening again? Because it just pops into your mind. You're on a desert island, and you can look that up because you never know.
Yeah, I suppose so. You may need to tell it to a coconut or something like that. Maybe
Exactly. No, my dog is the freebie. I'm going to tell her.
that's true. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I remember those kind of things, and they were like, yeah, they're just like very small. Sometimes just like 2 or 3 words, or just a date or something like that.
Yeah, and there's
So
usually
much
at
stuff.
least a paragraph, and you
Yeah,
could, I mean, if you were bored, you could read through all of that. And
yeah,
if you ran out of paper, it's so thick you could start fires with it.
yeah. We won't go to the other part because there'll be lots of leaves, I'm sure. So. Not like Greg at the
It's an
bibliothèque.
island, you can just jump in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like Greg takes a container full of toilet paper, and it's like, really? That's your luxury item?
It's an island, it's the beach, go in the water, wash
Yeah.
yourself off. Oh my goodness. You don't need to wipe when you're on an island, just swim.
Well, we better not go too far and stray into that territory because we could get in trouble for that, maybe.
All right, yeah, we'll avoid that.
But yeah, no, I remember. Yeah, I remember some of those things, and I really liked them because they had. I remember actually, I was looking up. I was trying to find the birth date. I think it was of. Was it? I think it was an actor or an actress, and it actually was in there. It was in one of them, and it was like, and I couldn't find it anywhere else, and it was
There
like,
you go.
so it was actually useful.
Because you need to have somewhere to satisfy your curiosity, because I think we're all so used to having everything at our fingertips that would be, I mean, aside from the whole separation from society and all of that, if you were alone on a desert island, that would be maddening.
Well, yeah, because like how many people are, what happens to me is like even in a conversation here, and it's like I can't remember something, and you're going, oh, I need to look that up, but it bugs you, it gnaws at you, and then usually what it used to happen to me was I'm fast asleep when I could sleep before, and it was like at 3 a.m. ping, now I remember what it was.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So you wouldn't have to have that problem. You could just look it up.
Exactly. It takes away that withdrawal that I would have from not being able to Google things.
Yeah, that's it's the great thing of the internet, but also the bad thing, because it's like sometimes it was so much fun. I remember going to the library and searching through the reference section for certain things, and there was enjoyment in that because you found a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
But then you do can get going into rabbit holes on the internet as well, but it's not quite the same as looking along the books and go, oh, what's that?
Well, you can still end up doing that if you make yourself a list of the references that you have to go find after you do your web search.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, the libraries don't have, or at least around here, I remember my local library used to have a pretty good reference section. They had a huge section for magazines and newspapers, and I would go because I was working a late shift, so I would take the bus into town, and then I need to transfer, but I'd sometimes come in a couple hours early, and I would read the archaeology magazine, British archaeology, Egyptology magazine. They had all these, and then they decided to make more space for computers. So they got rid of everything that I went in for.
Oh,
Every
no.
single thing. and the books on the shelves too, because there was a few books, the reference books, I was slowly reading over like a couple of years and reading a little bit at a time. And they got rid of them all. And it's like, oh, if you want them, you got to now pay the interlibrary fee. And it's like, oh no. So that pretty well was the last that and that's about 8 or 10 years ago, the last that I've really frequented my library.
I'm at the library at least twice a week, so.
Yeah, but you must have a good one, because here it's like, even when I first came here, like I wanted to take something out, and it's not a rant. I'm not having a rant against libraries, but it's like all they had was new stuff. Everything I typed in like 100 and some titles, because I didn't have any money to buy anything. So I typed it out, and they say, oh, well, it's in their reserve stock, but you got to pay like £2 something to get it. And I'm going, no, I don't want to do that. And like over 100 titles, like literally. And then finally there was one that I finally got the complete Sherlock Holmes in 2 volumes, like the novels, a little hardcover, and the short stories. And that sort of ruined things for me, because I was rationing Sherlock Holmes like I've been rationing Edgar Allan Poe. I didn't want to finish it, but that's all I had. I had these 2 books, and that's all I had to read when I first came here. So I read them cover to cover. So now I don't have no new Holmes to read.
That frustrating. Yeah, I don't know. We're very fortunate in Toronto. Our library has the highest circulation rates in the world. So it's actually funded quite well, both by the city and by donations and everything. And I complain a bit because they cut the foreign languages section. There used to be 140 languages, and now it's 40, which was a shame. But, they still have most of the major ones. So it's not something to complain too much about, because, a lot of libraries wouldn't have that at all. So.
Yeah, I loved it, the libraries, because when I was in Kitchener, Waterloo, where I live, and the interlibrary loan system is just great, because it was free, and that's why it was such a shock hearing, you mean I gotta pay? And then I used to go into Toronto as well. I used to go down to the reference library, and I used to love going there, and then the Judith Merrill science fiction library. All right, that's not the full name. There's a certain name for it. But yeah, Toronto has some good libraries, and I'm glad to see that even though that their budgets have been pulled back, they haven't disappeared in full. That's really good to hear.
And you can't. It's hard to complain about budgeting, because, like in Houston, city taxes do not go to fund the library system there. It's surreal. And Houston is a city that's very similar in size to Toronto, population-wise. And just, it's so depressing. I used to volunteer at their circulation warehouse, where books go in and out of circulation and go to the sales and everything. And the funding system there is just appalling. And it's fortunate that there are a lot of, this gets into a whole discussion about wealth distribution that you probably don't want to have. But because there are some wealthy people who are the kind patrons, they do have a good collection, but it's virtually all based on donations, which is such a iffy way to be funding a library, especially when you have a city of that size. And
no, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that must be because, I don't know if you Mark Richardson at Richardson Reads as well, like his library, and it's like I don't know if I could do his job. Like I could do his job for the library part, but the extra stuff that he has to do, I could not do it. I couldn't do it. But anyway, that's enough about libraries, I guess. Let's move on to the next
There's a little, only slightly off topic.
No, but that's fine. It's sort of fun to digress at times, and I needed to get that off about my library. I need to get it off my chest.
Fair. So we're past the encyclopedia. Next, we'll go to the histories of Herodotus, because 1, it's huge. You could burn these pages if you needed to. 2, this is a book that I used to, before I started being e-reader only on trips, I would bring this along on trips, because you don't feel compelled to read the whole thing. You just go, okay, what am I going to read about today? And you open randomly, and read some things about the, yeah. Anyway, I'm getting distracted because I'm going to start reading. And also, you can reenact the scenes in The English Patient where people are dying in a cave, writing in the corners of Herodotus' history.
That's the Aubrey de Selincourt translation, is it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one. Somebody sent me. I don't know where it is. Can't remember who the translator is. I've got it right here. If I can reach it without. Oh, there goes my mouse. It's the Oxford World Class. Oh, it's translated by Robin Waterfield.
Ah.
It's the Oxford World's Classics. I've not read this. I've only read the Aubrey de Selincourt because and you're right. It's perfect for taking it because I took it to the Middle East with me. I had 3 books. I had that and 2 collections of more or less short stories, and it's perfect for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do have to read this because somebody sent it to me and it was like I've wanted to, and it's like, well, when can I fit this in? But no, it is one of my favorite ancient bits of literature.
Well, I'd be curious to hear when you read it, compare the translations.
Yeah, well, that's what I'd like to do, but it's so. When was the last time I read it was when I was in jail in Egypt. So that's some know most of the story of that. So I don't. You know the story.
You better put a link in for anybody who's watching this and hasn't heard the story, because that's like to where you've told it before. Because anyone who's watching is going to think, "What's this?"
I guess I'll go over it just quickly again, but it's because it's in different places, like little bits. But I was in Egypt, obviously, and I was walking. I was at Saqqara, and I was going to walk to Memphis, the ancient city, and I didn't realize that I was walking through a military installation sort of area. So I got arrested, and what I had was, I had my 3 books, but I had 2 cameras, so that didn't go over too well. So I spent a week in the Cairo jail, but I was able to keep my books. So I had Herodotus, and I had City by Clifford Simak, and I had Georgia Boy by Erskine Caldwell.
That's an interesting combination.
Yeah. But yeah, no, but that's the last time I read it. It would be kind of neat. I should get a Penguin version and just, sit them side by side. And I've done that before with things. It takes a long time, but you sit them side by side and they're not too big of sections. So you could probably read a section at a time. I'm just looking here. Yeah. They're numbered like, 30. How is that numbered? Is it numbered as well, or like not paragraph, almost paragraph?
Let me double check. Yeah, it is numbered by paragraph.
Yeah. So that you could definitely do that. And that's a neat idea. That is a really neat idea.
That sounds like a fun project, actually, comparing them.
Yeah, because it's because that's why I say it's the Aubrey de Selincourt that I really liked, and I've read it maybe 3 or 4 times. But yeah, it's been, what's that? That's 1990. Oh, crikey, that's 30 years ago already. That's 30 years.
Time flies.
Yes. Okay, well, let's move on from ancient history. Let's
go
my ancient history on.
But next up, I have the Shahnameh, the Persian Book of Kings by Ferdowsi, which very similarly to the histories is something you can pop in and out of. And actually, this edition is great because it has the illustrations and everything in it.
Oh, is that the Penguin?
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's a Dick Davis translation. I mean, they have so many of his translations of medieval Persian stuff. It's fantastic. They've and re-released a bunch of stuff recently. So there's so many options now, because there are so many bad translations out there of this kind of material. So it's nice to have them be releasing in a nice, affordable form.
So how did you come across that the first time?
Oh, goodness. I mean, this is the kind of thing that's so well known that it's just sort of in the ether.
Okay, yeah.
You breathe it in. Everybody, anybody who has an uncle who's into poetry and history will talk about this kind of thing, I think. anything. Yeah, I always say that that's anything very famous. My point of reference is always some old uncle talked about it once, and that's
Okay.
where it comes from. But
You got it there. Is that larger than the Herodotus volume?
it
Is that
is.
it
Yeah.
is?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's an the dimensions are odd, but I think
Yeah.
it's better because the print is bigger. That is my one complaint with a lot of the Penguin classics is the print is quite small, but it's a little larger in this.
Yeah, I've wanted to get that because I've read. I realized actually probably about 3 or 4 years ago what I read was an abridged form,
Mm,
and it was because it's in verse,
yeah.
the original, so that should be in, and I'm sure I read it in prose. So
Mm,
it's like the first time I read the Iliad and the Odyssey was in prose, and I
mm,
didn't know, I was in my late teens, early 20s. I didn't know there was a difference,
mm,
at the
yeah.
time, and then when you do read the original in verse, it's a very
Mm.
different experience.
Yeah, although I think it's useful to do both just because I think a lot of times the translations that try to keep the rhythm of the language don't keep the meaning. So you need to have one of each to really get the feeling of it.
Yeah, well, it's like at times when I read English poetry, and I go, oh, that's an interesting line. How the hell is somebody going to be translating that into Japanese
Mm,
or Chinese? That's gotta be, and then you start thinking, well, what about the other way around?
hmm
It's got to be just a nightmare as well,
Yeah. And I
and
mean,
more.
there's so many bad translations too. And not necessarily of Ferdowsi because he's not that famous in the Anglosphere, but the Rumi translations that are just
Yeah,
appalling and that like edit the religion out. Like, I'm sorry, this is Sufi poetry. What do you do?
yeah.
And it's just mind blowing. I mean, there's so many modern translations.
You froze there, so hopefully, yeah, there you come back.
Yeah. And I mean, there are so many modern translations that make a mess of it too. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what is it about something like that? Because we spoke before that you do like sort of the Eastern Mediterranean sort of literature. What is it about that sort of gets you going for reading something rather than say North American or maybe British? Like, I know there's differences, but what for you is the key thing?
I think there's more of a focus on the poetry of language, even when it's not necessarily written in verse. And I think that style, that's why I think it's so artificial when people put the ancient Greeks in a kind of Western canon when they're so clearly part of the Eastern Mediterranean. And to say that something like the Persian Book of Kings is Eastern tradition and something ancient Greek is Western is nonsense because they're clearly both in the same well. And,
What
that's
about do you read much of ancient like Egyptian literature,
Yeah,
poetry?
I
Yeah.
actually just picked up Penguin Classics just put out, as in it just came out this past month, a new translation of a set of ancient Egyptian writings, which is not even exclusively kind of artsy or historic writing, but it includes things like business transactions and stuff. I
Yeah,
haven't read the whole thing yet because I just got it a couple days ago, but it's fantastic.
yeah. Because the other
Really
one
interesting
that
stuff.
that this person sent me was the Tale of Sinhu
Mm.
and other ancient poems.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's like there's most of these I've read, but not all of them, and I just love the pages of notes. Like there's like 15 or 20 pages at times,
Mhm.
in these. But yeah, no, a lot of that stuff's good, and the account book type things are very interesting. Or the letters, do you know if it has any of the Amarna letters in there?
I'll have to double check,
Yeah,
because I said I'm not very deep into it yet,
yeah.
but
No, that's because I really like that stuff, and it's always I thought has been sort of lacking in
mm,
you know out there because everybody thinks that's all it is just transaction stuff. But
yeah,
there was love poetry, there's pornography,
mhm,
you name it. Like there was fiction, there was everything, or medical texts.
yeah,
If anybody's ever seen the sort of papyrus, the surgical papyrus is just
mhm,
amazing stuff to see.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, there's
and
a lot of good stuff that
yeah, and then not only that, because we're, like, even go, you got the Ugaritic texts, you've got, you got all that stuff from the
Mm.
and it's just, this stuff is not, most people don't know it unless they're specialists in these things. And I wish they did do more things like this.
Yeah,
And
I think hopefully, because we do seem to be seeing more of it now. So fingers crossed.
yeah, I'll have to look at that Penguin one, because I didn't know
Mm.
they were doing it, because they did put out the Book of the Dead. They put out
Mm.
strange. Well, I think they did it because it's in the public domain.
Mm.
Wallace Budge's translation.
Mm.
It's not great, but it is a fun translation. I really like that translation, but it's not like, it really needs a modern translation, like
Mm.
they did with the. They did a really good job with the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Mm.
Um, they did a really good job, and it's. I know Steve Donahue sort of poo-pooed it a bit, because there's, like, fragments and stuff like that, but you don't need to read that part. You can just, you want everything in one place, and then
Mm.
you can get rid of the stuff that you don't want to, but you can't add what's not there.
Yeah.
So
I always
that's,
think the bits and pieces are interesting just in and
yeah.
of themselves. So, yeah, the Epic of Gilgamesh is the book I keep in my car for when I'm bored.
Which is it the newer Penguin one, or?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that is really, really good. And what's the guy? I'm not sure. Just thinking, there's another Egypt one that they had out, and I can't remember the his name that wrote or that edited it. He's written a lot of ancient Egyptian books, or
Oh.
Egyptology. I can't think of his name. See, there's one of the things I need a pocket encyclopedia for.
Exactly. I have to look that up.
But yeah, there's so much stuff, and it's really neat to see uh the Persian stuff coming up. Like I
Mhm.
say, when I saw that Penguin was doing it, and that's been on sort of my wish list for, many wish lists, but for quite a while. And there's so much other stuff. Like, I think somebody has been putting out some Zoroastrian texts
Mhm.
as well, which is really, really interesting. And anyway, yeah, we could go on for a long time,
Yeah.
but there's
It's a
just so
lot of
much.
good stuff.
Yeah, there's so much stuff. And I agree with you, though, with the Greek, especially the Greek, and maybe not so much the Roman, but the
Mhm.
Greek is definitely, there is an Eastern Mediterranean feel to some of that stuff,
Mhm.
and it is considered Western. But yeah, anything else
It
that's,
shouldn't be.
yeah, but it's the basis of Western literature, I guess
Yeah,
you would
but
say.
really, isn't it the Romans brought it over, so it's filtered through there that it became the Western thing.
Yeah, and then, but we use the also too as the Bible, the Old Testament, and that, which,
Yeah,
and that's not Western. Definitely.
exactly, exactly. But I
So
think
yeah,
it's like when people go to modern Greece and they go to Greek weddings or anything like that, and they say, "Ooh, isn't this weirdly Middle Eastern?" And it's like, no, that is not weird, and no, it is not exclusively a post-Ottoman thing. This
yeah,
is what the history is. Like,
yeah. Well, there. I don't know. Aaron. I'm going to be doing his tag. He's got what's it called? The Western Canon tag,
mhm.
and it's sort of to you should take a look at it, Aaron Facer, because you might want to do this one, because it says define your Western Canon tag, so you can
Oh, that's
define it.
fun. Okay,
But
yeah, I have to do it just for that question then.
yeah, because, well, that's the whole thing. You choose 20. There's three questions, and you choose, like, how would you define your Western canon, and that's how you define it. So you could bring in all this the Persian stuff and everything too, or leave it out and just and say no to it.
Oh, that's good. See, I had seen that tag going around and I hadn't clicked on anybody's videos because I'm like, well, I don't care about that.
No,
Now that
you
you've
might be worth
said,
it.
yeah,
But by
I'll
the
do
time
it.
this comes up, it'll be long. It'll be
Yeah, yeah,
forgotten. By the time this gets aired, but it should be something interesting. Anyway, let's move
yeah.
on.
All right, let's put something that's Western canon then. So this is the complete works of Shakespeare, but
Who?
it
Who?
also includes, I know he's a little niche. You might not have heard of him,
Yeah.
but it also includes a huge volume of analysis and also uh, basically a reference section. So it is double the size of most ones. This is by Worth Press, and so who do really lightweight but huge cheap editions, and it's all stuff that's public domain so that they don't have to pay anyone for the scholarship. But that, I think, makes it really interesting because you get bits and pieces of everything. And when I'm reading stuff, I often am more interested in the reference section than I am in the work itself. So that this has almost as big of a reference section as it has the plays and poetry is basically the reason I felt the need to pick this up.
No, it sounds really neat. Yeah, because I don't have any Shakespeare here, and I haven't read it in so long, and I just realized that. I don't think that's come up before, saying that I don't have. I think I
Wow.
realized I don't have any Shakespeare. And I used to read. I haven't read everything. So I think we were saying before. What's your favorite play though of Shakespeare?
I would say Richard III and Henry V are running neck and neck for me, but Richard III might be a little higher.
Okay, and you've got something special, a special
Yes,
text of or edition, I guess you would say.
that's right. I have the original text of Henry V on a blanket, so that and the text is lined up so that you see a sword in the middle as well, and
Oh
that
wow!
separates the acts.
You
It's
should have had that hanging
I
behind you.
know. Oh, I wish I'd thought about it so I would have it to show you, but it is a fantastic thing. It was a gift from my sister a year or two ago, and it's just brilliant. And it has all the original spellings as well, so that's fun. I always think
Well,
that's something that's missing in a lot of the editions that are made for students, where they modernize all the
yeah,
words. That's no fun. But
yeah.
this
So
is
at
great.
nighttime, you'll need a little flashlight by your bed to, yeah, when you have a bit of insomnia, you can just turn it on
Exactly.
and read. But yeah, well, I've said over and over, my favorite by far, I think so far is Macbeth.
Mm.
I like Macbeth, and I've said this several times too. The reason partially is uh, I quit school when I was 15, and I went back when I was 18, 19. So I sort of tried to quickly catch up. So I think they put me ahead. Oh, excuse me. They put me in the whatever level I was when I came in, but then I quickly started moving ahead. So I took Shakespeare in one English class, like over the I think the September term,
Mm.
and then I think I moved schools. And guess what? The Shakespeare play was in the next school with the next level was Shakespeare. I mean, was Macbeth. And then I took summer school, the next one, like grade 12 or something like that. And guess what the play was? Macbeth. And then finally, I think it was, and then finally, when I did it, went to another level or grade, it was Hamlet. So I finally was like, oh, finally a different. He actually wrote more than one play.
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about Hamlet rather than anything because I've done so much. But yeah, I guess Hamlet, because of that, is probably my second favorite play. But I have read other ones. I like what's this is where my brain sometimes doesn't work. Prospero. Um, what's the play with Prospero?
Now I'm going to draw a blank.
Because it fits for the desert island thing, and he has a library. What's it called? I can't remember
The
it now.
Tempest.
The Tempest. That's it. Yes. Yeah, that one. That one's pretty good too. But is it because like Henry, um, for you, is it the battle scenes in it
Yeah.
that do it for you? Yeah.
Well, and the whole tennis balls, my liege scene,
Yeah.
that's pretty good too. But yes, primarily because of battle scenes.
So that has that led you on to other reading histories, or did history lead you to that?
Uh, I,
One
I,
lead to another.
I think the history led me to the history plays.
Okay. So is there one thing in, like, when you read something, especially, well, we'll stick with Shakespeare. Was there something that you read in there that you go, oh, I don't remember reading that about that, and then you've actually, became interested in a little slice of history from a Shakespeare play.
Well, I think one of the most fun parts is there are the bits where you have the side characters talking, and it's like the Welshman with the leek and all of that. And then the thing to look into is what did the kind of regional and ethnic stereotypes look like in that era? And how does that, what we're seeing in the play, what was that related to that was happening in real life and that kind of thing? I would
Yeah.
say I'm more interested in the peripheral bits a lot of the time than I am with the core of any story.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It was I was wanting to see. It was because with me, it's always when I'm reading something, and it usually is it's technically a throwaway bit, like you're saying, the peripheral thing, and you go, wait a minute, and it's like, and then you sort of I always wind up rereading and going, that's not enough information. I want more.
Exactly.
And then
That's it.
you dig into it, and Shakespeare definitely has tons of stuff like that, because I haven't read enough Shakespeare studies, and I kind of wonder, is it because he just sort of, this was little bits of information that he gained or gleaned, and just it was like a kitchen soup type thing, and he just threw everything in,
Well, I
or did
think it
he
was like,
actually?
well, I figure it was jokes for the audience and they got it because they were there. It was like
Yeah,
the memes of his era and
yeah,
people were
yeah.
like, haha, I understand that reference.
Yeah, for those, yeah,
Yeah.
the humor and stuff like that, yeah. But there's other little things, I remember reading that were sort of, alluding to, not, it wasn't a humorous way, it was like alluding
Mm,
to little events or something like that, and you're going, whoa, wait a minute, what's that? And then that's again another rabbit hole that you
yeah.
can go down to. But yeah, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the humor, I guess, yeah, I could see that, because uh, eh, because everybody now sees Shakespeare as, cerebral and, highbrow literature. What was
But
it like in the time?
yeah, somebody was throwing a tomato.
Exactly, and it was like common people that basically
Mm,
watched it. You
yeah,
know,
exactly. It's like when
uh,
you're watching a Baroque opera and,
mm,
people, it's like, no, this was not like the classical and post-classical era. This was fun.
yeah, it's like they weren't there in top hats and,
Mhm.
cravats, watching Shakespeare. Well, obviously not for the time, but it's not that's not the kind of audience. But today, that's the audience that goes to see
Yeah.
Shakespeare generally,
Mhm.
unless you get Shakespeare in the park, then you're
Yeah.
barefoot. So
Well, and I think some things are popular. Like I know the Stratford Festival here has had a big push of, and not just them, but a lot of the quote unquote high culture kind of things have done real pushes for getting younger audiences, which I think are
wow,
mostly successful. I think the kind of stuffy top hat attitude that is less so with people under, let's say, oh, I don't know. I don't even know what the cutoff would be, but I feel like it's a previous generation or two who were before that shift.
hmm.
Because I see that in opera, especially like when you go to the opera, people under 45 are much less stuffy and are a decent part of the population. But I feel like people over 50 who aren't opera buffs will think, oh, well, that's, you have to wear a tuxedo and it's all snobs. Whereas I feel like, yeah, maybe 50 or so is the age cutoff where I think that there's been a shift in that.
That's kind of interesting, because here where I live, I don't know if they're still doing it post pandemic, but in one of the churches here in town, they would have once a week. I think it was Tuesday afternoons, a little concert, like, a classical concert. Like, it's usually a student playing piano or something like that. But it's not just a student. It's somebody who's really accomplished. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
they may be 18 years old, but they've been playing for 25 years, that type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and it's weird because I used to go to it because I was working at different times, but I was usually the youngest person there, and everybody else, yeah, you're right, like, the older people that were in their 60s and 70s retired. they're decked out in their suits and ties, just and it's
Mm.
like, this is an afternoon concert. You don't need to do that, But yeah, it's this view that classical music, Shakespeare is, this, and that puts off, I think, a lot of people, rather
Mm.
than, as you say, making it fun.
Mm.
It's actually fun. Um, Something that I couldn't remember. I think one other time when we talked about this and mentioned the Shakespeare Festival in Ontario,
Mm.
was that I couldn't remember the actor's name, but his Alec Guinness was one of, I think, the founders of that there. They brought him over, and
Mm.
I'm pretty sure it was Alec Guinness. I just remembered it now. I'd have to check that, but I'm sure it was him and a couple other actors.
Let me check.
Yeah,
Let's search for it, because we're not on the desert island yet, so we can find this out.
but it was just kind of interesting, and I couldn't for the life of me remember his name. I should have just said Obi-Wan, and then somebody would have known. To his bane, it's like, I remember reading a quote from him that he couldn't stand kids coming up to him, and that's all they knew him for was Obi-Wan.
Well, that's how it goes. But he was the smart one. He got his percentage of profits, so he was living it up after that.
So does it say who was he? Did he have any connection with it, or?
He wasn't. There are, what's this? Purchased. Yeah, there are apparently some really famous photos of him from 1953 when he was doing stuff there. And I just found an auction of one of the photos that's going for big money. So,
Wow. No, yeah, it's just like, it's something that people don't know, and it's like, you wouldn't have it there. I don't think it would not be there without him. And I think there were some others, and I can't remember who else was connected, but that's the one that sort of sticks in my mind.
yeah.
And I wonder, there must be a history of like the founding of it somewhere.
Oh, there definitely is. Okay, so it was the brainchild of Tom Patterson, who the theater that runs the smallest ones.
Yeah.
That's that one, which is now a National Historic Event. As
Oh.
of 2018 is when they gave them that designation. Yeah. All right, it's a long article, so I don't want to waste
Okay.
time. This will be boring viewing, but I'll send you the article on it because.
Yes. Yeah, I'd love to see that. Okay, well, let's move on from Shakespeare. We've had enough Shakespeare.
Sure. Enough Shakespeare.
I know all of a sudden you'll hear people going, "What?" It's as bad as me saying Jane Austen was. Oh, we don't want to go there again.
Yeah, people are very sensitive about Jane Austen. Watch yourself there. So next up, I have another big tome, and this is the Al-Mutawa of Imam Malik, who was the 8th century Islamic scholar and the founder of the Maliki school of Sunni Islamic law, or jurisprudence, or school of thought, if you prefer that. And he collected one of the basically first collections of hadith, which are essentially, I guess you could view it as supplemental religious material. So when you're evaluating Islamic law, you would first look to the Quran, but secondly, you would look to the hadiths. But because they are not considered the word of God or anything, they're just about the lives of the prophet. So you can argue about them more. And it's very fun. There's a whole field of hadith science where people evaluate what is a real story, what was a gossip story, what does it mean in relation to everything else, what does it mean in relation to this or this, and it's great fun.
Yeah, I've never read it, and that's probably a little more than I ever knew about it, which is really cool. Because yeah, it was just something that I didn't know. But I always sort of compared it in my mind, and I know this might be, is sort of to a Talmud. It's like the Talmud in a sense, because it's or not.
Well, not exactly, because the commentary, I think, would be comparable to the Talmud. But
Yeah, that's
I
what I'm
guess
thinking.
you could compare it more to the letters that are in the New Testament of the Bible, where it's not necessarily stories. And I mean, it's different because the Bible is codified in a different way, but I think comparably in that it's not about, it's the word of humans, right?
Yeah.
So the letter of whoever to whatever, those kind of things. So it's almost similar to that, I would say.
Yeah,
Although,
yeah,
if
because like when I think of it in that way, I'll explain it maybe a little more. Is that the Talmud is, or some of them like the Babylonian Talmud, it's um almost interrogating the biblical scripture and
Mhm,
talking about the other meanings. And there are, they'll quote other rabbis and so
mhm,
forth, all this kind of thing, and they'll be arguing over
mhm.
points.
Yeah,
Uh,
and that would be comparable to what the field of hadith science is, but an al-Matawa is the original, not original, but it is the stories themselves and not the commentary on them.
oh, okay,
So
okay,
that's a separate thing. And this
okay,
edition, I was going to say, is both in, I don't know if it's going to show up. There we go. Is both in English and Arabic. So it's
okay.
interesting that way because also if you were going to kill time on an island, it gives you double the effort. So
Oh, but yeah, to try to without a grammar, you're gonna go insane trying to figure out Arabic script, though.
oh no, but I can read the script. I just
Oh, you
it's
can.
yeah.
Okay.
So um, but read is recognize is what I usually say I can do. But given time on a desert island where you have the bilingual edition, you can work on that.
Yeah, because I remember when I was in Jordan, like you quickly learn the numbers.
Mm.
That's easy to do. And the other things that you learn, the words are the swear words. That you always learn the swear words first. Yeah.
Well, that's what you learn in any language.
What
That and where's the
edition?
bathroom?
Sorry, what
Sorry.
edition is that one? What, like, because I've
This
never seen that.
yeah, this is who's the publisher on this? It's from it's from Dewan Press.
Dewan Press. Okay.
Yeah. And the translated part is by Aisha Abdurrahman.
Okay, then because this is something that I think is a little out of ordinary to find. If you could email me that information as
Sure.
well,
Yeah.
then I'll put it down in the bottom because I think there
Mhm.
might be other people that'd be interested in it, and
Yeah, absolutely.
I am as well. So yeah, that's really neat because as I say, I hardly knew anything about it. It just sort of came across. I've read the Quran once or twice before, but I never really gone beyond that. It's like I with the Bible, because doing Near Eastern archaeology, I took several years of biblical Hebrew, and so I did go beyond that, and I did used to read bits and pieces of the different Talmuds,
Mhm.
and I always find it funny. And one of the best areas in there is where the rabbis are arguing to each other, and God
Mhm.
pipes in and says something. They tell him to shut up basically, and the words. But anyway, that's nothing to do with what you're doing, but it just popped into my mind.
Hey. When you talk about religious commentary, you just want to talk about some other religious commentary. That's how it
Well, yeah,
goes.
because like to me, they're all sort of interrelated, because
Mhm.
how they do it in one is usually how they do it in another. It's because they're people. They're going to have the same petty arguments, on and if you look at who's saying it, depending on their background or something like that, like if their family was a merchant background, they're going to concentrate on certain things that are going to be for that. And if somebody else is from a religious background, they're going to be concentrating more on the theology. And you can see these little threads throughout the commentaries.
Mhm.
It's really interesting. And it's not just like the Talmud. It's like any commentaries, like the medieval commentaries, the ancient for the Bible. Like and I see it in the Talmud, so I'm assuming it must be the same for the Quran, the commentaries on that. Must
Well,
be. I,
it's somewhat different just because of the perception of the text itself as something that is uh,
sacred,
set and
yeah.
unchanging, and like even someone who's not very religious like me, like I keep the Qurans up on the top shelf, right? I'm superstitious about that, and I say that as someone who's not very religious, right? So I think there's a slightly different approach, but
Mm.
I think the probably a similar inspiration behind a lot of the bits that you can have commentary on, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's true because there's going to be it's you're not as free to have commentary on it. I
Yeah.
guess is
Well,
the
I mean,
thing.
which isn't to say that there isn't commentary, because I don't want to boil it
Yeah,
down to something that sounds very like fundamentalist, because that's not true either. That's kind of an
it's more
overgeneralization,
structured. I
right?
guess it would be more
Yeah,
structured.
structured is probably a better way to phrase it.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
and basically for the Bible, it's been free fall, free or no free fall. No, that's not right.
Free for all.
Free for all. Free for all. That's it.
Yeah. Anyway,
I don't know where we are now in numbers, but we'll
yeah, I don't
just
know where we
continue
are either.
on until your pile disappears.
I think no, we're not down to the last one. Okay, so the next up, I have this is a and I almost came up with a list that was a bunch of books that weren't in English, but I thought I'm not going to do that to you. That's no fun. But I did feel like I would pull out this. This is a history of the literature of Spain and of Mexico. And I don't know if you can see that here. And I specifically pulled out this edition that is in Spanish because I'm currently working on my Spanish. And I
Oh
thought,
wow.
if I am on a desert island, what better thing to do than to read about this and improve my Spanish? This is also illustrated again, so that's great. And yeah, because really, if you're on a desert island, you have an opportunity to devote a whole pile of time to things. So,
Now but that's Spanish, so it's Spain and Mexico. You said, wasn't it
yeah,
before? Yeah.
yes, this book was published in Argentina, though. So,
Is there an English translation of that?
I imagine
Or-
there must be, but I don't know specifically. This edition is actually one that belonged to my mother. I kind of stole it from her, and it's from the 1960s. So, but there has to be something equivalent, I think.
Yeah, like there's because as I was saying before, I've realized, and even talking to Christina when we did this,
Hmm.
that well, Portuguese, but in that area, it was Spain, and it's like how many Spanish books, of literature can most people name off the top of their heads? And it's like I've only read a few, but hard pressed, I could maybe go to half a dozen to maybe up to 10,
Hmm.
and that's a poor offering for such a rich culture of writing.
Hmm.
And it's just not something that is either. I don't know if it's because there hasn't been popular translations, or I just never saw this. I just never saw
Hmm.
it, because that's why I was asking, how did you find out about something like this?
Hmm.
Because what I used to do is just go to the bookshop and look at the shelf and go, oh, that looks interesting, pull it off.
Hmm.
And that's how I discovered stuff. So if it wasn't in front of my face,
Hmm.
or it wasn't referenced to in something that I was reading, I'd never know about it at the
Hmm.
time when I was in my 20s.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's something that, unless you're exploring the card catalog back in the day or something, that
Yeah.
a lot of things get missed. And that's why I know this is kind of something people argue about on BookTube all the time, about how aware you should be of what you're reading and where the authors are from and where the work is from. But I'm a big proponent of being aware of that because, like, for example, with this, I've noticed that most of the work that I read that is originally written in Spanish is from Argentina.
Mm.
And so that's obviously missing a big part of the Hispanosphere. And so it's something I take into consideration. And I think it's always funny to me when somebody says, no, I read what I like. I don't want to pay attention to any of these things. It's like, yes, but do you think you have a better perception of the world than you really do? And I mean, I think if you're not interested in that, if you want to read exclusively, I don't know, science fiction from Nigeria, or you want to read exclusively classics from England, that's cool. But if you don't, and you think you're getting a picture of the world, you should be sure that you actually are, because I think we're all kind of guilty of assuming that we're doing a better job of that than we really are.
Well, I think there's different ways to look at that, in the sense of, you can look at it as saying, oh, you need to read this for um, sort of like, I guess, political reasons, in a sense,
Mm.
or you look at it and go, like, I see a difference in a way, like saying, well, I like the Spanish literature that I've read, and I've
Mm-hmm.
hardly read anything of that.
Mm-hmm.
So if I would like to read more, I'd like to go into it, but I'm not going into it in the sense of trying to, I guess there's a difference, and I'm not saying one's bad or the other isn't,
Mhm.
but there's a difference between saying reading inclusive and use that as the reason to go and search for stuff, than say that, oh, I like this. Where is that from? Oh, I like that style and I like that one, and then explore it more. I think there might be a little difference there
Well, maybe,
in a
but
way.
I feel like the response that people have when they're saying, "Well, I read what I like," but if you've never read this other thing, how do you know that you don't like it?
That's true. That is true. But I guess I, I think it's not the act of doing that. I think it's like trying to um almost like there's a different agenda with some of this. If it's done in one way, sometimes there's a different agenda of the reason to do that, and I think that's why some people are sensitive to that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
But
that gets overblown because, you know,
possibly,
because I
you-
mean, if you just want to read one thing, that's fine, but don't
yeah.
pretend you're not reading one thing.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing.
That's
Yeah, if that's what that, yeah, that's the thing. It's fine, like you say, if you want to read Nigerian science fiction, and now I want to go and look for Nigerian science fiction actually. But that kind of thing, and that's perfectly fine as long as you are cognizant of it and aware that's what you're doing. And I think that's the other way too, that all of a sudden you can be aware that, well, wait a minute, I have not read much Spanish material,
yeah.
literature, and the stuff that I have read, I've liked. So there's got to be more stuff there that I would like.
Hmm.
And that's, I think, the right attitude to go
Yeah.
about it, like regardless of anything else. I think
Hmm.
that's the best way to. But then again, there could be something like, as you say, something I don't know, like I don't know, um, Argentinian.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, we don't know what we don't know. That's the thing,
exactly. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, that's you're getting into Rumsfeldisms here at the moment. But yeah, but it is true. Like you don't know. But
Mm,
the thing is, that's where you do explore. But I don't know. Maybe I'm a little touchy with that because I do. I might be seeing an agenda behind it sometimes that's not there, but sometimes it is there, and
mm,
that's what I sort of question a little bit about, because I do read stuff, and I don't have one on Spanish literature, but I've got the Cambridge. I think it's the Cambridge. Yeah, the Cambridge. It's a 2 volume of Chinese literature.
mhm.
History of Chinese literature. I bought it so cheap, and I thought, because I this everything I've read of Chinese literature I like, so
Mhm.
I'd like to have more,
Mhm.
or explore more stuff, and I thought that would be the way to do it,
Yeah,
and that's why I'd be interested in that. And there's a few other. I don't know if they've done they must have done a Spanish one,
I'm sure.
but yeah, there was one that I wanted to get, was South African,
Mhm.
South African literature, and it's like, well, how often do you read South African literature, or did you see anything about South African literature?
Yes, I always say this goes back to the library thing. They used to advertise the library 140 languages from Afrikaans to Zulu, but when they cut back the languages, both Afrikaans and Zulu were cut.
Oh, jeez.
I actually did occasionally take out Afrikaans books because I speak Dutch, so it's close enough that it's kind of a fun challenge, but they cut the Dutch collection too.
Yeah,
But
that's too bad. But yeah, but mentioning Zulu, because I've actually got a book that was given to me. It's a slim little book on the Zulu language, and it's just
mm,
so fascinating. But
mm,
it's like I can't understand 3/4 of it, but it's a very technical little, but it's like 100 years old, and it's just,
oh,
I'm amazed
fun.
at how technical it is.
Oh, that
For
sounds really interesting.
It is, yeah. But yeah, no, you're right though. That if you don't know what you don't know, I guess that's the thing. And I think but you have to be aware of what you're reading. That's the whole thing.
Mm,
You be aware, and if you are comfortable doing that, it's like right now, um, I'm 90% or 80%, I should say, is rereading stuff, and I'm
mm,
happy with that.
yeah.
Like I'm not getting to do too much new stuff, and I know
Mm,
that, or stuff that I haven't read,
yeah.
but I'm happy with that at the moment, because
Mm.
I'm really reveling in rereading. Uh, so yeah. Anyway, Yeah, it's an interesting subject, and I don't think it'll ever go away
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
But I'm very pro statistics because, I would have thought, well, I read a lot of stuff that's from Spanish, but only from one country. So this would remedy that.
Yeah.
And open up more things if I worked on my Spanish on this desert island. Because what else am I doing on a desert island, right?
Trying to survive.
Well, but they do all those studies that hunter-gatherer populations actually spend more time relaxing than
Yeah.
people who are living agricultural or industrial lives. So
that's interesting because that reminds me, because that was the view for so long in sort of archaeology and anthropological world. And it wasn't until I think the 50s or 60s that it was started changing. And I met in Jordan one of the proponents of that started writing about this, but this was in the 90s. But when he was starting to write it, it was like he was like, dismissed completely. And yeah, and still people, like when I say that to people now, they just don't believe it. They don't believe it.
Yeah. But there's a whole socio-political part of that too that we probably don't want to get into.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I didn't think of that, but yeah, I can see that. But it's just I find it interesting that. Anyway, sorry. That's yeah. We're going into too far off topic here.
I was going to say we've gone in all kinds of directions.
So okay, so is there one more, or
there
is that
one more? And this was the spot that I was debating, but I went with something that was in English because otherwise I was going to start pulling out all these Folio Classique editions, and like it is such a shame. This is another tangent, so I apologize in advance. But it's such a shame that like both Penguin and Oxford Classics, they cover a lot of the same material that Folio Classique does.
Yeah.
But Folio Classique puts in so many more references. Like the reference sections are spectacular. And it is such a shame that none of the English publishers are doing the same kind of thing. Like it seems so much more common and I mean, not just Folio Classique, but other Francophone publishers that they just put more stuff in the ends of all of their older books.
And sorry, I'm getting ready for something once you talk about the books here. Sorry.
It's all good. So anyway, that's my rant. But I did end up picking something English so that I wouldn't have to do this whole thing. And that's Black Beauty. Because one, Black Beauty is fantastic because, you have class commentary, you have animal rights commentary, and you have a nice, catharsis of being able to weep over horses that are being worked to death. So, good times.
Well, the reason why I was reaching over was, as you probably noticed, there's no books around me at the moment. I've been sorting out stuff, and I cleared off a bottom shelf of a bookcase that I had the old Everyman libraries, the small ones.
Yeah.
And I found, I knew what was in there roughly, but look what I found: a Black Beauty with a dust jacket, with the old dust jacket on it.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's fabulous.
So that was kind of interesting. And it's just weird because that's the two things, because somebody else, and I found John Evelyn's diaries in 2 volumes, and somebody just asked me after I found it, are they worth getting? And I'm going, what's going on here? And then now this one too. It's like I haven't seen these books in like 4 or 5 years.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Nice illustration. But anyway, going back to Black Beauty. I'm sorry. I just couldn't believe that.
That's so funny. That's brilliant. That's fate there.
Yeah. So when okay, this one I should know. When did you first read Black Beauty?
Well, so when I was a kid in the 80s, there was a TV series that has nothing to do with the book, basically. And I think this is the problem with a lot of adaptations of Black Beauty, which is because it's such a overtly political book. But because it's a horse story, they want to boil it down to something else for kids. So I had watched this TV series and I think read the book after that and went, well, wow, this is not just nothing like the TV series. It's a completely different kind of story. And so I was amazed by that. And yeah, just the number of terrible adaptations, with the exception of the 1994 live action film, because that's quite true to the book. But yeah, the series from the 80s was nothing like
I don't
title
remember that.
only.
I don't
Title.
remember that one. I remember the what is it, 3040s, and I can't remember who was in it. I remember the older film, but I don't, and I remember there were other versions, colored versions, but yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not near that one.
And the really fun thing is, I've realized when I talk about this with people, people often confuse it with either the Black Stallion or National Velvet.
But National Velvet, yeah,
And they'll
yeah.
be like, "Oh, I've seen that." And that's like, "No, no, that's National Velvet." Or somebody else was saying, "Oh, I've seen that. It was about." And it's like, "No, that was the Black Stallion." Those are different books. But this is, I'm regularly telling people, this is not what you think it is if you haven't actually read it, or if you've only read the abridged versions. Because I bought a really nice looking illustrated edition a while back, and it turned out to be abridged. And it didn't
Wow.
have whole chapters, like it didn't have the chapter about the old war horse, which is about the Crimean War and the futility of war and all of that. And it didn't have the bit where Ginger is worked to death and is being carted off to the glue factory and all of that. And I think that's a shame because, again, people think they know this story and they're usually wrong.
Yeah, I'm just looking here. The just looking at the chapter titles, and I think this would be the unabridged one. A Strike for Liberty
Mhm.
is one. A Job Horse and His Drivers. A Thief, a Humbug. I love that. An Old War Horse. There we
There
go.
you go.
Yeah,
You have a good one when they include, because that's the one they always cut out when they make editions for kids.
yeah, because this is almost 250 pages in an Everyman one, but
Yeah.
really nice, really nice illustrations.
Oh, nice.
Amazing illustrations. I'm gonna keep that aside because I might want to reread that.
Mhm.
You've inspired me to maybe reread that one. See,
Yes.
I'm rereading. I'm always rereading.
Woohoo.
So yeah, so you picked some music as well.
I did. Now, I'm going to walk you through my thought process. So I'm going to hold up more than one thing because I had a whole issue. So my first thought was, I'm a big First World War buff, but I didn't pick any First World War writing. So my first thought was that I would pick Sabaton's The Great War, which came out a couple of years ago and it's power metal, but rather than being about fantasy, it's about the First World War.
Oh, okay.
And so this has songs that are about, T.E. Lawrence. And if you know that Cree sniper from up north, it's hilarious because this is a Swedish band and they're singing about this Canadian Cree sniper.
Oh,
And
I've never
all
heard of
really
them.
obvious things. They have songs about the Harlem Hellfighters. They're really interesting. And I like their First World War stuff because they also write songs about other wars, which are sometimes, like, their philosophy is that they're completely apolitical. So they'll write a song from one side's the perspective of someone on one side and another. And this is fine to me when the war is more than 100 years old. But they have one album where there's a song about the Falklands. There's another one where there's a song about Srebrenica. And that always makes me a little uncomfortable. I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's appropriate yet.
Too
But
soon. Too soon.
yeah, but this is good. But the thing is, there are a couple of songs on this I'm tired of. So I couldn't pick it. So then I was tempted to pick some French hip hop because that is another thing that I listen to a lot of. So I was going to go with De Frères by PNL. However, I thought, I don't know if this is too depressing because a lot of the lyrics on this are very, how would you put it? The plight of the working class, Franco-Algerian
Ah, yeah.
kind of thing, and again, I enjoy it, but I don't know if that would be too depressing to listen to on a desert island. You'd be thinking, do I want to think about drug dealers in Paris when I'm, chasing turtles or tortoises? I don't know which it would be. So then I thought, well, I'll go for something that's a bit of a cheat because this is multiple albums in one. And this is Handel's Concerti Grossi Opus 3, which is fun because unlike the Opus 6, which he compiled himself, this was basically a money grab and it was published together without his original blessing, I guess. So, and I think that's kind of delightful, and it's multiple records. So, and because it's in a hard case, you could kill if there's some poisonous snake coming at you on this island. You could whack them with this.
Well,
So
I
that's
like
what's
too that
going.
you use vinyl. It hasn't been too many vinyl lovers on here yet, so that's nice.
Well, it's not as fun to. You can't hold up an MP3.
Yeah, no, or well, even CD. Like, there's just something that's the artwork that used to be with it, or the liner notes. You know, like you.
Yes.
I don't know if you like Rush at all. I don't know if well, you must know who Rush is.
I know who they are. They're not really my scene, but yes, look at there's some art.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
That's
And then, the reason why I was mentioning Rush was, like, you read the little notes that they've got in these things. Like, there's little jokes and stuff like that, and it's like, you need a magnifying glass or a microscope to do the same thing on a CD.
yeah.
And then how do you do it on an MP3? You know.
Yeah, sometimes you can open a separate file, but it's not exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
because album art is an art in and of itself. So that's
Okay. Now we know what your sort of extra is. So what's your luxury item then?
so my luxury item will be this harp.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because I like to learn to poorly play an instrument every other year, pick up a new one, and this is my newest one, so I don't play really at all. But if I was on a desert island, I would have lots of time to practice when I'm not working on killing tortoises or something. I don't know why I'm after the tortoises now, but
well, you can dice them with that. Sorry.
well, no, I know why it's the tortoises, because then you can use the shell as a bowl afterwards.
Yeah. Well, because you'll need it for the soup, for the turtle soup.
There you go.
No, that's you've mentioned so how many languages can you read then? Because you mentioned Dutch, Afrikaans, and obviously I guess Spanish. And if you're listening to French hip hop, you must know French.
Yeah, and German and Turkish.
I don't know how people could do it, because I've tried languages before and it's a struggle. Like, when I went to university, I took this is what I took. I had to take biblical Hebrew. So I took biblical Hebrew, Greek, Latin, German, all at the same time. That really didn't work.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I took Swahili at university and I was okay at one point, but I don't remember any of it. Like, I can say, hi, how are you? Jambo, habari, mzuri. That's about all I can say now. It's just completely gone from my mind. But
so for the French, because I've talked to people about this before, and people ask, because I'm Canadian, originally, that, oh, well, you should know French because it's taught there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, by paperwork, I'm Belgian, actually. But,
oh, okay.
So it's a little different. But and also I think it depends which school board, but in a Canadian sense, like in the Toronto Public School Board and the Toronto Separate Board, there is a much higher French component than I think in boards elsewhere. Like, I know my sister currently lives in Calgary, and in their public school system where my nephew is, if you're in the Anglophone school system, you only have to take French when you hit high school. Whereas, for example, the Toronto Public School, you have to take it from grade 3 to grade 9, and the Toronto Separate School, it's grade 1 to grade 9. So it really, and I think a lot of people outside of the city don't notice that, and also don't necessarily notice that, like, the Francophone boards even exist. I've had a lot of that conversation where I've seen a number of people who would talk about how there are 2 public school systems in Ontario, and there are 4.
Yeah.
But
the normal one, yeah.
Yeah. But and yeah, I mean, I'm in an area where there are Francophone board schools here in Scarborough, which, and again, people are like, oh, but there isn't a French Canadian population. It's because there are people who are Belgian or Lebanese or Algerian or Congolese and, Ivorian and whatnot, who also have French language rights from a Canadian government perspective.
Yeah, that would make more sense if you are sort of immersed in it with a class from grade 1 up to grade 9. You can learn a little more. I went through it, and at some point, I just stopped going to classes, and they just didn't enforce it.
Mhm,
So I don't know any French at all. Like,
mhm,
to my detriment, because I
mhm,
thought, well, the thing that I would like to know is 19th century French, so I could
mhm,
read Balzac and stuff like that. But if I could read modern French, I could easily
mhm.
probably step back and do that, but I
Yeah.
can't. And and that could have ruined me for languages ever, because
Mm,
I think once if you start learning something like
yeah.
that young, then there's a knack. I
Mhm,
think there's a knack to it, and I just can't, because at various times I've tried other things. Like I said, I've even tried Zulu occasionally, because I've had
mhm,
stuff in the past, but I've also tried Anglo-Saxon, Old
mhm,
English, and
mhm.
I've had like Sweets grammar. And over the last 40 years, at least 4 or 5 times, I've sat down and saying, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. It's never happened, and it never will happen. I
You're
just
saving it
know.
for the desert island.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, because then that would be the only book I take. I take everything, just grammars and stuff, and that would be it. But I've already done mine, so that's not the case. But anyway, no, this has been great, Jen.
It's been fun.
Yeah, and so any plans for your channel coming up? Because well, this is going to be coming out in sort of mid-November. So
Mhm.
anything?
Well, hopefully I'm gonna be caught up because I got way behind with, doing videos because I was doing stuff, for the BookTube prize, and of course you have to film the videos, but you can't release them, and it completely threw me off because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, I have all these videos in the pipeline that I can't release yet." So, hopefully by November, I'll be caught up.
So well, I guess at this point, because this won't air, but until then, was there a certain area that you were judging it on, or because
I
there's ones that do?
Well, I had started in for round 1, I was in nonfiction, and then in the middle, I was doing translated fiction, and that video is out, and people can watch that because, I found one book, that was translated from Turkish where I thought, "This is weird," and I went back and looked at the original Turkish, and the translator not just when they switched it into English, they changed a whole section, so there are 3 chapters in that book that are essentially an entirely different book than they were in the original.
That's
And
not good.
yeah, it's
I don't, I
crazy.
can't translate, but I know that's not good.
Right? And I mean, and in a way that feels very political, like in the original, a character, someone's killed in a hate crime in the United States. And so there's a whole motivation behind this hate crime and blah, blah, blah. And in English, it happens in Germany, and the motivations are completely different. People's names are changed. Like, it's crazy. And it's like, I don't know if the publisher thought, oh, US people are not going to buy this and it'll be bad for the sales if it looks negative on the US, so they changed it, but it was wild.
That's sort of vague. I vaguely remember a trailer for some film about this guy who goes to, I guess, Argentina or somewhere like a Spanish
Mhm,
speaking South American country, and he's a huge celebrity because his book has been translated. But
mhm.
the person who's translated has rewritten it in a sense to romance or something like that, I think. And
Yeah.
he's just going, "What's going on here? That's not the book I wrote."
Well, I think it must happen more than people notice because I know a lot of translations change things. I know, what is it? Han Kang's translator originally didn't speak that good of Korean when she started translating, and I think she's better now. But so the first couple of books she translated had just mistakes in them. But I mean, this is wild because it's just he changed the whole setting and character motivations and everything. It's bizarre.
Like, doesn't you just sort of wonder, like, the original writer and the publishers, do they just then sell the right and then they just abandon it? They have nobody
It's
checking the stuff, or?
apparently not. I know Britta Buller has talked about this before, how she read the Dutch translation of one of her books, and she speaks Dutch, so she read the translation and went, "This is wrong," so she could send it back. But I don't think a lot of writers are given even the option to do that first. And I mean, who knows? Maybe they told the author, "Hey, your book will sell more if we make this change." I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
Um, It's crazy. Like, the translator is on social media, but he's not very active. So I tried to reach out to him, but I didn't get an answer. So I don't know. There's a lot of craziness with that. But no, the stuff that I'm holding on to now is back in nonfiction. It's all a bunch of U.S. history stuff, which is not my favorite kind of thing to be reading necessarily, but interesting.
But yeah, definitely send me the link to that video too, or I'll try to find it, because I'll put it down, because it will be, like I say, a few it'll be a month or so ahead, or I mean, before it gets aired, but somebody might be interested in seeing it, and then they can easily click on the link. So do you have any videos of you playing your harp?
I'll have to make them when I get a little better. I don't want to torture anyone at this point where I'm just like learning how to tune properly.
Well, I don't know if you saw Felicity at her version of the Desert Island books. What is it? My House is a Library is the name of her channel, and like she plays the viola at times and stuff like that. And so I put all that stuff down in the thing. So that would be cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess that's 1 hour and 20 minutes. So I think we'll call it there.
Yeah.
And thanks very much, Jen. Stick around for a minute or two.
Sure. This was fun.
Thank you. Then we'll see you next time, BookTube, with a new Castaway.